Welcome to the Expert Edge. This is the show where we bring on experts in their fields of health and wellness practice, and we hear their stories and learn what they see working in the field of diabetes reversal and prevention. And I'm happy to introduce today's expert, Shun Foreman. Welcome, Shun.
Hey, Lucia. It's so good to meet up with another nurse. Yes.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yes.
So, we're going to have a conversation between two nurses today. And besides being a nurse, Shun is a sugar awareness advocate. She
Mhm.
bridges history and health, and that's going to be one of the unique slants that we're going to be bringing to you in today's conversation. After years of believing that cotton was king, her research revealed that sugar was the unmentioned queen that shaped economies, fueled slavery, and continues to affect Black health today. She's guided more than 1,000 women to sugar awareness and helped many to improve their numbers and their confidence in the doctor's office. She has over 25 years of nursing experience, and she shows how understanding sugar's past and its impact on the present can lead to greater health and empowerment. So, we're going to kind of dive into that today, looking at sugar's hidden history and impact on health. So, tell us a little bit about how you got started with your interest in the whole area of health and then lifestyle.
Ooh, the whole area. It's so funny because I didn't really even think about it until one day I was writing a paper and reflecting on my childhood and kind of like who I was as a kid. And I used to love teaching my baby dolls. Love teaching my baby dolls. So I'd line them up on and teach them and I got to the point to where there was one day I actually started making assignments for them and like writing assignments and I put an A on on their quiz, or I would either, even hold some of them back for tutorial. You know, I don't
Love
even
it.
know,
Love
but I just enjoyed that, just being a kid and teaching, and or at least what I thought was teaching.
it.
My mother is not a nurse, but on the weekends, I just remember there were so many times where she would take me to an elderly person's home, or we would go
Mhm.
to a nursing home or to the hospital, or, visit what we would call like that old school sick and shut-in list.
Yeah.
And I didn't know. I didn't know at that time, but it took some reflection for me to understand that what I learned during those times was, for one, community service. And then the
Mhm.
next thing was that I learned that there was a lot that you could learn from people just with nonverbal skills. A grunt might mean pain. A grunt could also mean that I'm reaching for something. Could you help me? A grunt could mean a stroke. So I just started looking at my life in the past, and I'm here today, and it's so weird because I remember one specific day where I was playing with the baby dolls, and I was, holding one back for a tutorial, and helping them out, and then for some reason that baby doll told me she was sick. Okay, she didn't tell me she was sick, but that's my imagination getting to play. And I remember getting a plastic Ziploc bag.
Mhm.
And well, they weren't Ziploc back in the day, but a plastic bag. I taped it up, and then I got a needle and a thread. And then I taped the plastic bag up on the post of the bed. And then the needle and the thread, of course, that would be the IV. So that was my first IV. I remember my mother walking into that room and not saying anything. She literally looked at me and she just walked out. And, I'm so grateful for that because I think, for one, I think about being a parent. My kids are 20 and 21 right now. But I think about how many times we interrupt process of, just even by asking questions, or even by saying, no, you can't do that. What are you doing with the needle and thread or whatever? But I think her silence just gave me permission to
Mhm.
explore, and that being a pivotal point, not knowing that I was going to go to nursing school, but at that point, of course, I didn't. I've always enjoyed, helping and, you know, just wherever there's help needed, I've always enjoyed that. So that was just a point for me to kind of, I think, open the door for nursing. And I thought I was going to be an engineer. I went to school for 2.5 years, only to figure out that thermodynamics and myself, we would never, ever, 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 ever agree. And my dad was had to go to the emergency room one day, and he he went in for chest pain. And the chest pain for him, at that time, I every man, black man maybe, was diagnosed with having a heart attack. His was not a heart attack. It was actually double pneumonia. And the treatment plan would really be really tough, if you're treating somebody like they're having a heart attack and they're really having pneumonia. So he had a little moment to where he kind of fagled down as I look at it now.
Mm,
And it scared me. And I just remember thinking, I don't want to be in this position ever again. If there's any way that I can help or explain or comfort or guide, I wanted to be that person. And then that's when I made the shift to become like a nursing student, and it was the toughest thing I think I could have ever done. I think about the thermodynamics class, but I'm thinking, God, nursing school is thermodynamics 2.0, because it was tough. We had to
yeah.
balance it all. We have to balance, nursing and learning all things. But the one thing my clinical instructors always told me was that you're so good at the bedside, and so
Mhm.
there, that's that one thing, that one piece of hope that you can hang on to. And here I am, I'm a nurse, passing state board. So I'm grateful for that. And it took me some time. I kept sticking my foot back into the world of trying to go back to school. Okay, what about nurse practitioner? That didn't work. What about business? Because I always kind of felt like I had some part of me wanted to have a business. So that didn't work out either. And then just one day, there was so much going on in the world. I happened to listen to a radio station on my way to and from work. And I just remember the question was always like, what are you going to do about it? And I'm like, oh, that's a to the point is that question laid on me heavy, especially what we had going on in the world at that time. Trayvon Martin was one of those things that kind of stood in front of me, thinking about my blackness and what can we do. I mean, if you are a gunshot wound, I can't do anything. So there was a program, Human Rights and Social Justice. It was a liberal studies master's degree at Southern Methodist University. I enrolled into that program, and it
Mm,
just opened like everything. Like, I think at the end of the day, it was the most reflective way to go to school, like, because every course, whether it's a Holocaust or whether it was ethics or whether it was women's rights and suffrage or civil rights, every course required me to do some type of introspection. So I get to the end of the course, or the end of the degree plan, and I'm like, ugh. I always knew I wanted to do a paper on diabetes and African Americans. I knew that. Uh, but when you start looking for African Americans and diabetes, you can find everything. Like, literally, we don't need to write another paper about diabetes and African Americans, because it felt like everything like that I was thinking, it was already there. Like diabetes,
mm,
diabetic distress, or just medications, the cost of it, the total cost of diabetes, and all of those things, all of the work has already been done. So I got to a book, and one of the books I read was Dr. Joy DeGrew's book, which is Post Traumatic Slave Syndrome.
mm,
And that book really just encouraged me to look at any problem that we have, you know, in your family, for yourself, or whatever. Look at that problem, but trace that problem back as far as you can. So go to your father, go to your father's father, if you can, trace it all the way back to slavery. So I couldn't trace diabetes, but I could trace sugar.
mm. Interesting.
So sugar, and then you once you open up that door, there were so many books about sugar and history and just some of the atrocities that had taken place. And I remember getting to another book, Sugar, the World Corrupted by James Walden. And finally, I get to this book one day. The kids are out of the house, and my husband's gone, and the dogs are well behaved on that day. But I'm sitting there with that book, and probably on my third or fourth Dr. Pepper. And I was reading, I get to the third chapter, and it's about sugar and slavery.
Mm,
Like, I literally, damn, like, sugar has never been good for us. And so I then sort of shifted my behavior with sugar.
mm,
And that was like the thing that opened my eyes. I don't know about awakening or anything like that, but it was a thing that opened my eyes to say, wow, if it was bondage and slavery back then, and when we look at diabetes today, it is bondage for the person who has to monitor their blood sugar, so many times a
mhm,
day, or end up on dialysis, or having to get an amputation or take medications, around the clock. So it really just opened my eyes up to bondage. And
mm,
I got to another point where I was in the paper, and I knew, like, I kind of have to go and touch history or things before I can understand them. I think that's why nursing works because you can actually see the patients. Um, but um, but there was a lot going on in Sugar Land, Texas at the time.
mm,
And one of the people who was really involved with trying to maintain the records and keep the history and preserve the sites of those who were into convict leasing was this man named
mm,
Mr. Reginald Moore. So I came across an article, and that article led me to a contact number to the archivist at Rice University. And I was just like, let me just try to see if I can talk to Mr. Moore. I think I talked to him so much that he was just like, God, if you want to know more about Sugarland, then just come to Sugarland. And that's what I did. Um, Beautiful connection. It was a
mm,
beautiful connection. He was battling with his health at that time, but as we stood at the old Imperial Cemetery, Mr. Moore told me that he had been doing like sugar work, and talking about convict leasing for like 20 years. He told me
mm,
he had never made the connection between sugar and his health. And
mm,
he told me also to just continue to do the work because the work is good work. Because my thought was just like how damaging it was from a slavery perspective. His was, yes, from a bondage perspective too, but I was seeing the same thing, health wise,
mhm, mhm,
And so from that I said, I've never really been to a, plantation tour, so I took a couple of tours down near New Orleans, and that was another space where my eyes were open. And I say I always left that place with internal tears because, you know, it's one thing to read history or to find out about history, but in Texas, we always knew slavery to be something where we were cotton is king, not so much anything about sugar. But
mhm.
um, I think for me, it was just like I really started to feel like what historical erasure felt like. People think about it as like getting rid of something, but no, there's a feeling when you don't have any knowledge of history and you've been educated all the way through, a master's degree. So, yeah.
That's really interesting in that it's an angle we don't often think about.
Mm.
And as you went and visited this place called Sugarland, Texas, a lot of our listeners may not know anything about the history of Sugarland. Can you just give us a little
I can.
microcosm of why was
Yeah,
Sugarland, Texas, an important piece of this story that you were exploring?
absolutely. So, post emancipation, we
Okay.
are we are free. Black and brown folks are free, and but the slaveholders, they've got an issue, right? Who's going to work the crops? So there was an amendment that came up, the 13th Amendment, that said you can, everybody's free unless they are convicted of crime.
Hmm.
So the state of Texas, wealthy landowners, which down in Sugar Land, Texas, happen to be the start of imperial sugar. So they link up, and then we start seeing these crimes, people being criminalized, and then you can put them into the system and make them do the work that once, was done by slaves. So
So they
if
were raising sugarcane, or were they only
yeah,
processing sugar?
they were in the sugarcane fields, whatever work that needed to be done related to sugar, yes.
So interesting because it's like I've never even thought about growing sugarcane in the United States. I've always thought about
Mhm.
it as something that happened in the Caribbean, on the
Right,
islands, right?
right, right.
Never knew that we had sugarcane fields even here in the United States. So that is right there, new information, I think, for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And so then you had this whole plantation, you might say, sort of
Mhm.
culture that we've often associated with cotton, but it
Right.
also happened around sugar
And
and the
it was
sugarcane
worse.
processing. Interesting.
Yeah, and sugar cane working was much more gruesome on the body. If a person was committed to that type of work, they usually had a lifespan of 4 to 7 years. So if you put a 14-year-old boy in there, he's not going to make it to his 18th birthday.
What
So
was
it was
so physically brutal about it?
the heat, the conditions, when you're trying to chop the canes, you could actually get cut, you could get
Mhm.
infections. A lot of them died of heat stroke, and
Mm,
also I saw on some of the graves that some drowned, and some just died of disease. So
mm,
it was
interesting.
pretty tough. And then just the processing of sugar cane. The work is really, really hard. It's hot, takes a lot of heat
Yeah,
to actually process and refine sugar. So yeah.
it's interesting. But why do you think understanding this historical thread is so important for healing today?
I think just for me, it's if we're gonna educate people, let's educate based upon the truth. Because I know that we take a lot of and I just think too, both sides of the story needs to be told. And if you
Hmm.
continue to erase like the trauma that was associated with sugar and slavery, and especially since the numbers, like when you look at the history will tell us that of the 12 million or so Africans that were put into slavery, 70% went into sugar colonies.
Really?
So I'm
Yeah.
like, what?
Yeah.
So that's 8.4 million.
Hmm. Yeah.
So I think to grasp it all, we've got to look back. When they called the disease sugar diabetes, like my family, they used to call it sugar. She got the sugar, he
Hmm.
got the sugar. You
Yeah.
know, it it makes you understand the weight of the word even, you know?
Mm.
And so I think just having the knowledge of understanding when you look back that this thing was not so good,
Hmm.
right? For bondage. When you speed it up to post emancipation, this thing was not so good. And then when you look at the numbers and the rates of diabetes for Black and brown folks today, it's not so good,
Right.
right?
It's so true, and it has such a big impact. But because that impact of sugar, we are now seeing in the general population really growing with the whole movement towards more refined and processed foods in
Mhm.
everybody's diet. And so I know one of the things that you talk about as you try to raise people's awareness about these links between historical, the history of bringing refined sugar into our society and our lives, you talk about making a sugar shift.
That's right.
Talk to us about that. What does that look like?
Yes. So the sugar shift is first just I love leading with awareness because the story really starts with me. When I was taking down those pops, pop after pop, and going to sleep with the pop, you waking up with the pop and donuts and all the things, I had no awareness that
Mm.
it was the cause of my weight gain, which then was the cause of me being in almost a pre-diabetic state. And, we can talk about the pre-hypertension and all of those things, but 55 pounds down now and been able to sustain it just by looking at, my sugar intake. It's
Mm.
so critical that we make just that shift in awareness to say, you know what? I've been going to the gym and that wasn't working so much. Or even when I do get the membership, I'm not motivated as much as I was when I got the membership. We have to start thinking about why are you not motivated? Well, if sugar gets in the way of all of that clarity, then we
Mhm.
have a whole nother problem.
Yes.
So making that shift is really just starting with awareness. The second thing is just not really, we have to be aware that sugar comes in so many different forms, so many different names. They all do something different, but they kind of all impact the brain the same way. And then, if nothing else, at the end of the day, the American Heart Association, I love that they have guidelines for added sugar, which tells us for added sugar, a man shouldn't have any more than 36 grams of added sugar per day, and a woman
That's still
and
a lot.
well, but you know what? At least there's some guidelines because when you look at that
Yeah.
Coke or whatever it is that you're drinking, you say,
Hmm.
"Oh, this is 64." So yeah,
Yeah.
it gives you some at
Great.
least, you know, parameters.
Hmm.
And then a woman shouldn't have any more than 25 grams of added sugar per day, along with children between the ages of 2 and 18. So I just love that, we have something that's structured out there that helps us to make other people aware. And that's what starts to create like the shift in people's minds. Like, oh, all that Kool-Aid that I used to make, and I never made Kool-Aid with just 1 cup of sugar. But that 1 8-ounce cup was 25 grams of sugar, added sugar right there.
Yeah.
So yeah.
No, it's incredible how ubiquitous sugar has become, even in, foods that don't appear that you don't even think that they would have a sweetener in them because they're a savory food. I
Mhm.
mean, think there are chips that have sugar in them and they're like a salty chip. So it's like, what's with that, right?
Yeah.
And so you're completely accurate in saying that we need to become really aware of where these added sugars are. And label
Mhm.
reading is a great place to start. But if
Mhm.
someone that's listening to us today maybe feels overwhelmed or discouraged, just like seeing the size of the problem in their own life, what do you think the first step looks like to escape the slavery of sugar?
Mm. I think you really have to ask yourself a critical question, which is, do I have a problem with it? And you start kind of working with that question by saying, can I quit it? And then that's where the mental, you're like, whoa, wait a minute. You mean this and this and this? So I think you just have to ask yourself that question. Am I going out of the way to get something sugary sweet? Am I overeating? Um, so I think once you start to look at that, then that's the type of reflection you need just to be honest with saying, I might have a problem with this thing.
Mhm.
Because sometimes I didn't know. I was a nurse at that point, 21 or 22 years. I didn't know. I never
Mm.
made that. We passed the test, right? I knew
It's
carb, sugar, but I never really made it like solid in my brain that a carb is a sugar, Sean. Like, and I didn't
Mhm.
care what a carb or a sugar was anyway, because guess what? I was finally making money, and I'm gonna buy my baby these cereal, and I'm gonna take us out to dinner and all the things that I thought, I wanted to do. So you really have to just start with an honest question with yourself. Do I have a problem with it? Am I overeating?
Yeah. No, I love that. And I think that is a great first step is just becoming more aware. Imagine
Mhm.
that. And
Mhm.
I love that you have a free gift to share with our audience today. The link for that will be in the description under this video that you're watching, whatever page you're watching this on. So just pop down into the description and you'll see the link for Shun's free gift. But tell us a little bit about what people get when they click on that link.
Yes, so that is an app that I developed. And so it is just making the connection between your food, your mood, and your money. So
Hmm.
I say, we used to have the excuse of saying, oh, it was more expensive if we ate healthy. But I think now we can say junk food is right. We it's I think they're running neck and neck. So, and I also think that once people make that connection of just saying, oh, I ate this, just truthfully track what you're eating. Don't worry about counting any sugars or anything. But what was your mood like 30 minutes to an hour after? So once you track that and kind of see, like, oh, and then how much did you spend? And you're like, oh, so it's just really a 7 day like challenge just to take yourself through it for 7 days, track truthfully, see how your mood is, and see if you can find that there's a connection between what you're eating and how you feel, and also how much you're spending.
I love that. I think that's great bringing those three aspects together can really help us understand how is this affecting me, my life, my family.
Mhm.
And so I really appreciate you having developed that and being willing to share that with us. And
Well,
just before we close, I would love to know what would be like your final words of wisdom, something you want people to really take away with them in a practical way. Like, how am I going to actually make a difference in my life based on what
mhm.
we've heard today?
Yeah. I think first, just don't give up on yourself. I mean, if you are listening to this podcast right now, you are in a position to create change. And the work that Lucia is doing is incredible for us. Because if you think 10 years ago, we wouldn't have platforms like this. We wouldn't have people who could tell us what is right. Lucia and we're not wasting our time. We really do know that changes and shifts can be made
Mhm.
if people will just take the time to believe in themselves first and then just make one small shift at a time.
That's
One small
so
shift at
true.
a time.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that with us, Shannon. Thank you for being with us here today. Really appreciated you sharing so much from your research and from what you've learned as you've looked into this topic at an angle that many of us have probably never heard about
Yeah.
and definitely don't know very much about. So I really appreciate the work that you're doing. And if you're listening to us today, just remember health is wealth and it
Mhm.
comes by choice, not by chance. So thank you for sharing some time with us here today.
Wow. Thank you so much.